Blessings, beloveds. Welcome back, Anastasia, Cosmic Astrologer. Happy Equinox to all of you. I hope this day is a beautiful day for you wherever you are in this cosmic world. Now, today's topic is actually about the full moon in Aries. So it's just an overall overview of the full moon in Aries and some of the energies around that. It is really special and really powerful and really important for a couple of different reasons. One, because the full moon is a day away, so it's not right on the equinox, but it's not too long after the equinox period. So first of all, the equinox, well, here for us it's spring equinox in the southern hemisphere. In Australia, where I am, and for you guys in the northern hemisphere, it's the autumn equinox. It's a very symbolic, spiritual opening. It's the path of the sun's movement in as it crosses over and marks these different seasons that we have every year. But on a spiritual level, the power that it carries is our own internal spiritual evolution or journey or flowering or development. And it's because it's the sun being a solar energy, we could say that it's the solar internal spiritual journey of the hero, because the sun represents the hero, it rules Leo. And in its archetypal expression, it has very much to do with the solar journey of the hero through his individuation process. So it's a very special time to connect deeper in your own spiritual solar journey, wherever you are with that at this point in your life. The other thing that I wanted to mention as well, actually, no, before I go there, well, I will just touch on it because I'll expand on it in a moment. Now, we have the full moon in Aries, which is a very powerful full moon for a couple of different reasons. The Sabian symbol for it is really quite remarkable, actually. And I'll read you what that is in a moment. But a few days later, what we have is, well, it's not actually a few days later, it's about a week or so later when we actually then have a new moon in Libra. There's a festival that's celebrated in Hinduism. And this festival is a very, very powerful expression and reflection of the divine feminine. And it's all about the divine feminine. It's called Navratri, for those of you that are interested. It happens every year, and it always begins during a new moon, and it's always around about this time of the year. Now, this year, it's actually on the 9th of October, and this is important because it does coincide with everything that's going on in terms of the energies that are current at the moment, the vibration that is vibrating in our cosmos. Internally within our own selves and externally. And, you know, obviously we're at different levels with that, and we are tuned into various components depending on who we are and where we're at in our own life. I'll talk about the Navratri festival shortly because it relates to the divine feminine, and because it begins with the new moon in Libra, I think it's got something very powerful to show us and to speak to us about relationships. And this full moon in Aries that we're about to have tomorrow is a very interesting full moon. Now, the full moon is always reflected because of the sun's light. So the full moon is in Aries, therefore the sun is in Libra. Now, when we look at the full moon, we usually look at the sign of the full moon, which is Aries, pardon me, for tomorrow. But we always need to take into account its polarity, the sun reflecting that light, which is in Libra. So the polarity axis of Aries Libra is very much about self and other. Um, so it's about our own sense of our own identity, who we are, and how we relate to ourselves, and how we relate in our relationships. So it's our own relationship to ourselves and the relationships that we have with others in our life. So this full moon is bringing a lot of attention and focal point to this energy of who am I, my own identity, and how am I relating to myself, and how am I relating to others in my world of relationships. How am I participating in my relationships? How am I engaging in my relationships? Am I bringing awareness and consciousness into my relationships? Or am I projecting a whole bunch of unconscious stuff? Probably a bit of both for all of us. Now, the full moon in Aries has a few difficult aspects to it. So it has, contradictory, I suppose, energies, you could say, which is very typical in pretty much every single day of life. We don't wake up one morning and there's no contrast, that everything is just on one platform or one stream. There's a number of different streams going on, energetically, spiritually, physically, emotionally, and mentally. So this full moon happens to be conjunct Chiron, as Chiron is now in its, has been for a while in its retrograde movement, in Aries, but it'll retrograde right back into Pisces. But at the moment, during this full moon, Chiron is at about 2 degrees of Aries, so it's only it's very, 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 very close to this full moon. So to me, that highlights bringing up our own sense of identity and the components of our identity that need to be healed. The components of our identity that may feel wounded or rejected in some kind of way, whether it's through trauma or just difficult experiences throughout our life, including past life traumas as well. The thing is, past life traumas can be activated in this lifetime without our awareness or understanding. That's probably a whole video unto itself. But the full moon conjunct Chiron really speaks to that part of you that needs to feel whole, that needs to feel a connection to its identity, to have a deeper sense of what your own identity is and who you are. So what kind of relationship you have to yourself. And the Chiron there is simply enabling an opening for us to explore deeper that part of ourself that needs to become whole, that needs to become healed. And because it's opposite the sun, naturally, it draws in our relationships. So the relationship, the most primary relationship, well, the first one is the one you have with Source or the divine or God, Goddess, whatever word you use, it doesn't really matter. And through that, the relationship that you have to yourself. These are the primary relationships that really reflect, therefore, every other relationship you have. Because the relationship you have with yourself is then poured out into how you relate with other people. A very simple example is if you are not feeling happy and you're feeling really low or really upset or really angry, or down, or your self-esteem is really low, well, that's how you're going to interact with others. That's the part of yourself that's going to be reflected and projected, as it were. And to on the opposite hand, if you're feeling really confident and optimistic and happy and inspired, then it is that part of you that's going to be experienced and seen in your relationships. Just keeping it very simple. I'm really just wanting to point to this idea of the full moon being conjunct Chiron. Well, it's not an idea, it's a fact. It's an astronomical phenomena. Now, last year on the equinox, we didn't have this configuration. So it's a very special configuration. It's really powerful for us to heal something within ourselves. But not only our self-identity, but also how we are bringing that part of ourself into our relationships. So the highlight is self-other relationships, relationship I have to myself and my world of relationships. How do I relate to others? How do I listen to others? How do I hear others? That's Libra. Now, in Aries, it's about yourself. So it's about what is your self-identity? Who are you? Who do you think you are, really, at the core level? At a core level, some part of our identity is carrying some kind of wound in some kind of way. And whether that's a result of experiences that have happened in this life, or whether it's a remnants of energy from past lives, when Chiron is conjunct this full moon, Chiron in Aries is going to be that journey of healing our core self anyway. But this full moon is just activating and highlighting that energy and giving us an opportunity to perhaps become more aware and more illuminated about which part of ourself needs to become more whole, which part of our identity is fractured or needs more healing, needs more work. So, the full moon always shines the light. The two main lights in the heavens are the sun and the moon. And it is those body of lights that highlight things. Now, we know when a full moon appears, it is literally a light, an illumination. So in terms of our consciousness, it brings up some kind of crystal awareness towards the area that we need to be paying attention to. Because it's in Aries, it's about your own sense of identity, and because Chiron is there, it's showing you perhaps it is this part of your identity that needs more work, that needs to be healed. And as I said, because the sun is in Libra, it's drawing in our whole world of relationships. So there's a strong focus on how we are relating to ourselves and how we are relating to others. That journey is a lifetime journey. We are always developing, becoming more mindful, more aware, and evolving. And through this evolution, our relationships change, don't they? How we relate to people changes. How we understand ourselves and how we understand others is always developing and evolving. And when we get these planetary configurations, such as a full moon in Aries conjunct Chiron opposite the sun in Libra, and I'm going to talk about a few other aspects in a moment, it is getting our attention into the very thing that needs to be worked on, which is relationships, and the primary relationship being the one you have to yourself and also to the divine. Now, the Sabian symbol does bring in reference to some divine force and energy coming through this full moon. So I'd like to read that to you. But before I do that, just a couple of other things. This full moon is in a T-square as well. T-square is a configuration between three planets. So what we have is we have the sun and the moon opposite each other. And, well, actually what I'll do is I'll share my screen and just quickly show you guys the chart so that you can see visually what I'm talking about. Now, this is the chart for the full moon in Aries coming up. Australian Eastern Standard Time, it's on the 25th of September at 12:57 p.m. Now, it'll be different for those of you in the north. It'll be on the 24th or thereabouts. As you can see here, here is the moon Chiron conjunction in Aries. There's the opposition to the sun. Don't worry about the house placement. It doesn't really mean anything, because unless you are living here in Melbourne where I am, this chart is irrelevant to you in terms of house location. So you're just wanting to pay attention to the aspects between the planets that I'm pointing to. So there's the moon Chiron in Aries, opposite the sun, sun conjunct Mercury. So, that conjunction with Mercury there is quite significant too, because Mercury is moving direct, and Mercury is in Libra. So that's highlighting our mental stream, our mental body, our thought processes, being very focused on relationships and harmony and balance and equality and justice and fairness and all those things. And we're also receiving a trine from Mars to the sun. Mars is in Aquarius, so we'd much prefer to have a trine from Mars as opposed to a square. So it's Mars is trine the sun, and it's also sextile the moon. So Mars is actually adding a really soft, supportive flow of energy to the sun and the moon, and to the polarity of self and other. Mars by its very nature is all about its own desires and, what it wants and how it wants to get it. But because we're seeing a trine and a sextile, and Mars is in Aquarius, it has a much softer offering. In Aquarius, it's going to bring about, in this full moon, it's going to basically bring about more of a attunement to fairness and equality and justice in our relationships as well, and more of a considerate humanitarian kind of approach, if you like. Aquarius is all about humanitarian qualities and really wanting all things to be fair and equal. Now, Aries is not about that. Aries is very self-centered and very selfish at its most core archetypal expression. It also has very beautiful qualities as well, of course, such as courage and spirit and inspiration and passion and, all those things. But I like that trine to the sun from Mars and the sextile to the moon. That just means that Mars is supporting this full moon, which is lovely. The difficulty is with Saturn. Now, this is the T-square that I was talking about. If you look over here, Saturn is at 2 degrees of Aquarius, which means it forms a square to the sun at 2 degrees Libra, and it also forms a square to the moon, which is at 2 degrees of Aries. This is called a T-square configuration. Now, if you were born with this, which somebody will be born with this, or has been, this is a very, very challenging configuration. It's not, T-squares are probably one of the most challenging configurations or aspects to work through. They can be incredibly dynamic and powerful as well, and really enable the individual to strive for great achievements. And in this configuration, that energy is there because the T-square it's a cardinal, what we call a cardinal T-square, because Libra, Capricorn and Aries are all cardinal signs. So these are the signs of initiation. So there's something about initiation relating to this full moon. So perhaps that's about the initiation that we need to step into in relation to healing some component of our sense of identity, and therefore healing our relationships as well. The square, though, that Saturn makes to the moon and to the sun, which is what creates this T-square, is not easy. Some of the key notes and key words are frustrations, anxiety, apprehension, and experiencing resistance from others as well. The keynote with this T-square is to have patience, because the inherent sort of drive of this energy is going to be to want to push quite hard. Moon in Aries can be very pushy. So there might be a desire to want to push hard and confront things head on. Confronting things head on is okay because the moon's in Aries and that's actually necessary. But you will have to employ some patience and also take responsibility for what you're stepping into, what you're intending, and the behaviors around that, because the consequences do have actions. And Saturn always reminds us about consequences and responsibilities. So it's just important to keep that in mind when you are tuning into this full moon in Aries, because Saturn there is kind of like standing in the center, if you like, of the sun and the moon, which both are in the polarity of self and other. And Saturn is there kind of saying, hi, yeah, you need to really work on the relationship with yourself and the relationships you have with others, that these are the responsibilities that you need to consider, that you need to step into with all of that. As I said, because it's a cardinal T-square, there's a desire to want to push through things quite forcefully, but Saturn will not allow that. Saturn will put the brakes on, and it will say, okay, hold up, take a step back and reflect on what's going on here. Take responsibility for everything that you are feeling and stepping into, and how you are relating in the world of relationships in your own life. So that T-square is a bit tricky, but in a more positive way, it also gives because it's such a dynamic energy, it contains initiation power. The message there with Saturn will be to be patient, as I said, and give consideration to the way you are dealing with your relationships, essentially. But much can be accomplished with this energy because it is a cardinal T-square, and cardinal energy is very, very powerful. It's all about initiation, essentially. So that's the full moon in terms of the main sort of highlights that are connected to it. But the message essentially is self, other, and healing whatever needs to be healed at this point in your life, for yourself, for your own identity and your relationships, because that's going to be a different experience for every single one of you, depending on where you are at in your own evolution and growth and development. And Saturn is about blocks and limitations and frustrations, but it's also about growth and development as well. So there's a lot we can learn from Saturn too. So he's in there giving his energy to this full moon. So it's not a typical full moon in Aries, because it's got these configurations that alter its energy and that ask of us to pay attention to the points that I've actually made. Now, I would like to read the Sabian symbol for this full moon, because it's really quite beautiful. Okay, so that's the book again for those of you who have not. There's a few books on Sabian symbols, but this is the one that I use. All right, so 3 degrees of Aries is what you will read, because the full moon is at 2 degrees, 2 minutes and 20-something seconds from memory. The keynote is the sustaining power of the whole as the individual identifies himself with its life. Now, bear with me because there's a couple of paragraphs to read. Having become objectively aware of his nature and his basic humanity, the individualizing person finds power and inner security in realizing his essential identity with the section of the universe in which he operates. He and it, that doesn't sound right. He and its thing. Okay, I'm going to skip that first part. To his consciousness, united in a cosmic planetary process, in a participation mystique, in inverted commas. Metaphysically expressed, this is the concept of the identity of Atman and Brahman. That's actually just talking about source. Brahma is the divine, basically. In another sense, through his ability to identify himself with the complex of life activities surrounding him, the individual person can become truly not only an image and representation of the whole of his natal environment, local, planetary, and perhaps eventually cosmic, but an agent through whom the whole may express itself in an act of creative resonance and outpouring. Now here comes some more profound lines. This is the avatar ideal, the ideal of transpersonal life and consciousness to totally concentrated to and directed by a divine power. This power can also be conceived as the archetypal self, the Christ principle as it operates in and through an individual person and destiny who have become its outward manifestation in order to meet a collective human need. Pretty powerful Sabian symbol, I think. And in short, I guess, or in summary, what that's really highlighting is the core archetypal identity, sense of self that we have, and that connection to the divine, essentially, the Christ consciousness, and our relationship to that through our own personal sense of identity and self and who we are. Okay, so now with regards to the Navratri festival, which is a Hindu festival celebrating the divine feminine, I'm bringing this in because it also relates to Venus. Now, Venus is going to go retrograde on the 6th of October, which is not too far away. She's going to go retrograde at 10 degrees of Scorpio. 3 days later, the Navratri festival begins. The Navratri festival is a celebration, but it's also an offering and a clearing, basically. So the Navratri, Navratri just means 9 days and nights, essentially. So this festival goes for 9 days and nights, and it is 9. The number 9 is significant because there are 3 goddesses, so 3 days are devoted and dedicated to one of those goddesses, 3 days to each one. The first one is Durga, or Kali can be another one. The second one is Lakshmi, and the third one is Saraswati. And they all symbolize very unique and specific things, but they are all a mirror and a reflection of the divine feminine. And this festival begins during a new moon in Libra, which is all about relationships, and perhaps I'll do another video on the new moon in Libra and what's going on thereafter. But this new moon in Libra that begins on the 9th of October, on the 9th of October, and Venus goes retrograde 3 days before that into Scorpio. Now, Venus is an aspect of the divine feminine as well. She's going retrograde in Scorpio. And this Navaratri festival, as I said, is very much about clearing and transforming and healing components of the divine feminine within us and all the myriad of aspects that the divine feminine represents. Now, I just want to, because I've made a few notes here, just get rid of that. So, as I said, the first goddess is known as Durga, goddess Durga, D-U-R-G-A. And she helps us identify and eliminate those aspects of ourselves that are not helpful, skillful, or productive, such as greed and envy, procrastination, laziness, lying, gossiping, etc. So those first 3 days are dedicated to her, and the offering that we give to her is that so that she can help us with all those things that I just named, to overcome and to clear those sorts of behaviors or attitudes out of our life, so that we can live in a more purified way. The second one, which relates to Lakshmi in very typical terms, is often associated with with divine abundance in a material level. So a lot of people worship Lakshmi and offer many flowers and rituals and so on and so forth to her so that they can receive material wealth. But on a more deeper spiritual level, she can help us develop and maintain helpful qualities such as patience, forgiveness, compassion, loving kindness, and integrity. So the next 3 days are devoted and dedicated to her. And the last 3 days, which are connected to Saraswati, and Saraswati is the goddess that connects to wisdom, you know, the higher intelligence, wisdom, the divine feminine that connects to the highest level of wisdom in terms of esoteric wisdom. That can connect to astrology, philosophy. It could even be religious aspects. Think of it as like ninth house in terms of the astrology. She enables us to open our consciousness, our right brain, and receive beautiful wisdom that's incredibly powerful. And so she connects to self-realization, understanding universal truths, such as our divine nature and the interconnectedness of living beings. Yeah, so they're the three goddesses that are celebrated during the Navratri festival, and because they represent the divine feminine, and Venus is the divine feminine as well, or an aspect of the divine feminine. And Venus goes retrograde in Scorpio just a couple of days before this festival. You know, these things are not happening by random chance, you know. Navaratri happens at different dates throughout the year. So it doesn't happen on the same day, same month, every single year. It alters and changes slightly, like a lot of festivals do, spiritual festivals, celebrations. But so Venus in Scorpio going retrograde at this time, to me, is quite profound, because the Scorpio component of Venus going retrograde is really taking us into a very deep shadow component of the divine feminine that has quite a dark quality to her as well, because Scorpio can have quite a dark quality to it. So this Venus going retrograde in Scorpio, aligning with the Navaratri festival of honouring the divine feminine and purification, is really very powerful. Venus in Scorpio is really going to enable us to purge emotionally very deep emotional attachments that basically do not serve us anymore, that cannot assist us in our path forward. We have to let go. We have to release. We have to purge, and we have to die and be reborn, as it were. You know, Scorpio is the death, rebirth process and experience in life that we experience a lot. You know, sometimes it's on smaller scales, and sometimes it's on very large scales, but we experience the death, rebirth process of life all the time, you know, and just even in relation to the seasons, you know, summer, winter, you know, we can look at many different layers. So this energy of the Navaratri is very powerful. It's just, you know, a week or so after this full moon in Aries. Full moon in Aries is calling our attention to that wounded part of ourself that really needs work and attention, and honest work and attention, and healing. And then that can translate into our relationships. Then, you know, on the 9th of October, when Navaratri begins, there's a new moon in Libra, as I said before. So more attention in our relationships, but it's a new beginning because it's a new moon. So we've got to always, you know, keep in mind the the relationship of the sun and the moon and what it inherently means. So the full moon is always about bringing things to our consciousness, illuminating, even if it's just the smallest thing that sparks off something in your awareness. That's a very powerful gift to receive. When that moon goes into Libra and joins the sun and it becomes a new moon, then there's a new cycle beginning, which will be very powerful because of what we've gone through with this full moon in Aries, conjunct Chiron, and everything that I've discussed that connects to that particular full moon in Aries. If you're interested in the Navratri experience or festival, you can just look it up online and just have a look at what goes on and what are some of the practices or rituals that you could do if that's something you were interested in. That is something I'm very interested in. I've been to India a couple of times, and I really have engaged a lot in a lot of Hindu practices, and when I went to India on both occasions, I did that as well. I've been to all the goddess temples and yeah, just lots of different experiences and offerings, and yeah, I've had amazing experiences. So even in now behind me, you can't see it, but if you can see that lamp behind me, there's a bookshelf there, which you can vaguely see that. In that bookshelf, that's a very, very sacred space in my living area, because I have my father's ashes there. I have very special things on that shelf, and on one part of that shelf I have those three goddesses, as well as Radharani and Krishna as well. I'm not a practicing Hindu, but I do love a lot of the components of Hinduism and practices and things like that. So I tend to practice bits and pieces here and there, because I do yoga and meditation. It all kind of flows in together. So yeah, back on that bookshelf, I have those three goddesses there, Durga, Lakshmi, and Saraswati. They are such beautiful goddesses, and they represent the most beautiful components of the divine feminine. And do not think that this does not apply to you if you are a man. That's one very important thing that I forgot to mention. This divine feminine quality exists within all of us, regardless of our gender or sexual preferences or whatever. Divine feminine and divine masculine exist in all of us. So when the energy is reflective of this divine feminine, then if you're a man, this is a great opportunity to connect to the divine feminine within you and heal something about the divine feminine within you, which is a very powerful thing to do and incredibly healing for your relationships if you're a man who has heterosexual relationships with women. You know, by engaging in this kind of awareness and conscious healing, there is great opportunity to heal any fragmented feminine components within your own self, which do essentially emerge through you know, the upbringing you had, the relationships you had with women when you were a child. In other words, the cosmic energies in your birth chart, such as Venus and the moon particularly, and what they represent for you in your own birth chart in terms of how you relate to the divine feminine within your own self and in your world of relationships with women. So there's many ways of approaching this. There's many benefits. Yeah, so I think I have shared all I wanted to share for this video. The moon is in Pisces. Well, let me just double check. Yes, I don't need to. Yes. The moon is still in Pisces at the moment because the full moon is at 2 degrees of Aries. So, you know, we'll see the moon, the full moon today. It will look like it's full, but it won't be technically full until tomorrow. And in its apparent fullness, it'll be in Pisces, but it doesn't move into Aries until tomorrow, the 24th of September. Just checking to see if I've touched on everything I wanted to touch. Yes, so Equinox time, very powerful for our spiritual growth and development. Full moon in Aries, conjunct Chiron, square Saturn, trine Mars, emphasizing our identity and what needs to be healed about that, and therefore what can be healed in our relationships as a result of that. Venus goes retrograde on the 6th of October in Scorpio, and 3 days later Navratri begins. Divine Feminine, Venus, Divine Feminine celebration, 9 days and nights of the Divine Feminine, and working through those principles that I discussed before. So it's a very, very powerful time from now over the next couple of weeks, all in relation to clearing your energetic body, spiritual body, emotional body, healing aspects of your own identity, and therefore healing components in your relationships as well. So there's a fair bit there, and that's something that I'll leave with you guys to reflect on and absorb, and see how you go with it all. So happy full moon in Aries, which will take place tomorrow, and I'll be back soon with another video, whether it's a planetary update or just another teaching. Actually, someone requested I do the nodes conjunct planets, so I will do that. I did respond to that person and say I will do that. That's a good idea, because the nodes conjunct planets has a different meaning to the nodes squaring a planet. So back soon, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Thanks to my new subscribers, and thanks again to all of you for all your beautiful comments and provoking questions. I really appreciate and welcome them all. I say that during every video because I do. I love you guys to engage and ask questions or offer your perspective on things. You know, all of that is welcome. If you're interested in a personal reading, I'll pop my email address below, so you can just email me directly. And once again, if you don't have an accurate time of birth, don't assume your time is accurate because it's a hospital time. It frequently is incorrect, even when it's a hospital time. So if you want your chart rectified, that's something that I can help you with. The service that I offer, it's not something that most astrologers do. So I do work quite differently from that perspective. I am a double Aquarius, and Uranus is very strong in my own chart, so maybe that's why I do things a little bit differently. So I'll leave that with you, and look forward to hearing from you guys soon if you decide to contact me. Thank you so much. Many blessings. Happy full moon. Happy equinox. Look after yourself and look after each other. Many blessings.